SportsCenter right now. I'm Antonita Collins. Tonight, these two teams meet for the first time since that game in which we saw 2 ejections, 5 technical fouls, and a post-game altercation both inside and outside of the Clippers locker room. So what's different from their January 15th meeting? How about no Blake Griffin for the Clippers, who had 29 points in that game before being ejected for scuffling with Trevor Ariza late in the 4th quarter. Houston was also without James Harden, who sat with a hamstring injury. That was the last game Harden missed this season, and the Rockets are 17-1 since he returned. Speaking of which, Houston owns the longest active winning streak in the NBA at 13 and have yet to lose this month. They are the 10th team in NBA history with multiple 13-game win streaks in a season. Now, let's get it back to First Take.
Houston heading back to L.A. to face the Clippers. We know CP3 and the Rockets know all the secret hallways and back doors. Max, what impact will the locker room drama last time around have on this matchup?
Well, there are some differences going in here. Number one, Blake's not there, right? But Doc and Austin Rivers are still there, and that's going to mean something, I think, to Chris Paul. And I think what this really is about more than anything, Stephen A. Smith, is Chris Paul walking a fine line with his emotions. Look, there's no punk in Chris Paul, and he's not under any circumstances going to let someone come off on him. But he also has to be careful here to show enough maturity, which I don't think was on display last time, where he can show the kind of leadership to display to his team. We have our eyes on the prize. I'm trying to win a championship this year. I'm not worried about any petty concerns where I came from. You know, that's all in the past. So I understand he's not going to let anyone take advantage of him, and they may look to antagonize him. Because if you're the Clippers, and the Clippers are surprisingly good since the trade, since the Blake trade, they're fighting for their playoff lives. You know, they had a good win last night on the road against a solid team in the Nuggets. So the Clippers are looking to win. One of the ways I would try to win if I were the Clippers is exchanging an inferior player for Chris Paul if they can both get, you know, teed up or kicked out. And really, everyone on the Clippers is an inferior player to Chris Paul. So Chris Paul has to keep his obviously, I'm not suggesting he be someone he's not or in any way roll over for anyone. But I think he's got to keep his emotions in check and harness them and funnel them toward the job at hand and not allow anyone to get his goat, to get under his skin on that team. That's what I'm going to be watching for in this game, and that's how I, in fact, think that the first meeting is going to affect this one, that Chris Paul is going to be able to walk a fine emotional line because he's got to be psychologically prepared going into the game.
Well, a couple of things to take into consideration. Number one, it's going to be vastly different from last game when the Clippers won 113-102 because Lou Williams had 31, but Blake Griffin had 29 and 10 that game. Blake Griffin is not there any longer, and guess who's back? James Harden, because James Harden didn't play in that last game. He'll be playing tonight. And so when you look at it from that perspective, you're talking about a guy that's the imminent league MVP for crying out loud, that he's going to be on the court tonight with Chris Paul and those boys. So expect Houston to show up. I give the Clippers a lot of credit. I watched that whole game last night between them and Denver. They were down 19 with a little over 4 minutes left in the third and came back with their second unit. So I give Doc Rivers and the Clippers a lot of credit. But this is a different beast. This ain't Denver. This is Houston. And this ain't Gary Harris, you know, or Djokovic. This is James Harden. And so I think it's going to be different under that premise. The fact that James Harden is back, he'll be playing, and the likelihood is that you're going to stomp the Clippers because of it, I think will leave Chris Paul and those boys in a better mood. And they will take out their ire, their frustration, their disgust, their animus, or whatever the case may be, on Austin Rivers on the court as opposed to off of it. But getting back to Chris Paul, here's the reality of the situation. Chris Paul is one of the great basketball ambassadors. He's a star guard, one of the greatest point guards I've ever seen, to be quite honest with you. He's just special, and we're seeing Houston benefit tremendously because of it. When I got on Chris Paul about it on January 15th, I'm not wavering from that position one bit, and it's the reason why I hold him far more accountable than anybody else. You are the president of the Players Association. You are a leader. I don't give a damn about that report that was out talking about it was just Trevor Ariza or somebody trying to get in the locker room. You had people come through the back entrance where you don't have to come outside to get in. There was a back way into the Clippers locker room. I'm saying everybody doesn't know that. Chris Paul knew that. He's the former Clipper. He had something to do with that. The players that tried to get in through the front. You can't ignore that. Now, this is not Chris Paul. It's an aberration, and he is a pit bull, and he's going to compete and come at you. All of that's true. And there's no reason to Soto excoriate him for it. But you cannot give him a pass in that regard. You're absolutely right, Max. He has to control himself, and it's more important. Let's put it to you this way. We can't hold Chris Paul accountable like he's just another player. He's not just another player. Even if he's a star, he's not just another star. He's the president of the Players Association. You cannot be involved in anything like that ever again.
Well, and I appreciate that point, Stephen A. I appreciate that point. I hope Chris Paul does too.
He does.
I imagine he does. But I think actually what's more important than his ambassadorship of basketball, as the head of the Players Association, is the fact that he's looking to win a championship. The way a championship player here reacts, in my opinion, is by stomping the Clippers. You're right. James Harden's back. That should make things much different. If they beat the Clippers by 30 points, that makes and he keeps his cool. That makes a much bigger statement than letting them get under his skin, getting teed up and ejected. A much bigger statement. Chris Paul's issue right now in his career is, I agree with you, if you just watch him play point guard, let's leave Magic out of this. He's 6'8". He's more than a point guard. If you just watch Chris Paul play point guard, apologies to Isaiah Thomas, the original, and everyone else. I watch and I think that is a perfect point guard. Perfect. That's exactly how a point guard, at least, I know the game has changed. Maybe nowadays Steph Curry is or whoever else. But time was, you were supposed to play point guard exactly like Chris Paul. And yet, and he's a leader, and he's tough, and he's fired, and he's intense, and yet he's never been to a conference finals. Like, that will dog him the rest of his life, if he's as competitive as he is, if he doesn't get this together. He's on a team that should, at minimum, make the conference finals. He's got a crime partner in James Harden, who, as you said, is likely to win league MVP. He's got to keep his eyes on the prize, which is winning a championship, not getting even, because, Stephen A., people can say whatever they want. Why did that go down like that? I don't care what anyone says. He had hard feelings about Doc Rivers and that organization. Doc Rivers, Blake Griffin, obviously, because that doesn't happen just anytime. That happened against the Clippers. And he's got to get past that and keep his eyes on the prize.
Max, he's 32 years old. I believe he's about 32, going on 33 years of age. He's had some injuries in his career. Tomorrow is not guaranteed. Health is not guaranteed. Knowing that he walked away from 5 years, $200+ million, because he didn't want to play for Doc Rivers and he didn't want to play with Blake Griffin and Austin Rivers. He was sick of what was transpiring there. He goes to Houston. So every point you made, which is obviously correct, what the bottom line is, what all of that, the umbrella that all of that falls under, is that you need to justify walking away from $200+ million, even though he'll probably get most of it back once he signs his new deal with Houston. The point is, if you did that, there's a reason. And you highlighted the reason for us by what transpired the last time you were at the Staples Center against the Clippers.
Yeah, well,
that can't be ignored.
It's working out in H-Town. Houston, 11-0 this month and 32-3 when James Harden and Chris Paul are both in the lineup. Later in the show, many have been invited, but only some have accepted a visit to Trump's White House. Find out what the defending NBA champs are doing instead of meeting POTUS. And it's the topic you've been waiting for. Max and Stephen A. face off against Mr. Cowboy himself, Will Cain, over one of the more controversial calls in NFL history. Don't go anywhere.